Hello, so as we said, I'm Melanie. I'm now, scary to admit, a third-year PhD student. And I will be talking about how we can integrate urban farming into cities, but by reusing space available and resources available already, and like how can we quantify that and quantify the value. So the reason why we're looking at this is, as we know, by 2050, there'll be 3.5 extra billion people on this planet. And we're already using all the arable land available. In fact, more than that. That's why we're deforesting. So by having all these extra people, how can we feed these people closer to where they're going to live in the future, which is cities? So it's trying to think, could we maybe produce more food closer? On top of that, the urban heat island effect means that cities tend to be 2 to 3 degrees warmer within than outside, which is increasing our requirement for ventilation and cooling and energy use for that. So we're trying to think of more natural ventilation techniques, passive ventilation techniques, which could maybe include rooftop greenhouses and plants and greenery to reduce the energy use of cities. But while we try to develop our planning for future cities in terms of reducing energy use, producing food more locally, we should try and keep in mind that cities are places for people, where people got together for education, social purposes. And so maybe we could try to integrate urban farming within the social structure of well-being and healthcare and education. Today, urban farming in terms of reusing infrastructure already exists, but mostly in North America, in the US, and in Canada, and in Asia, which is huge, but they have more tons of factories. In Europe, the biggest example was The Hague, and it went bankrupt a month ago, where they, where they transformed the top floor of a Philips factory into an urban farm. So why does it work in some places and doesn't work in other places? So one of our PhD is looking at what are the best locations for urban farming in London, and how can we identify that? And also, if we were to reuse derelict space in London, how would we monitor the performance and make sure it actually works well, doesn't use much energy? And also, what is it like to do it? So this is what I mean by trying to reuse resources already available. For a greenhouse, we need these things: space, water, light, heat, CO2, and airflow. These are already available in cities in terms of like building design. Community can produce CO2 within the building. We could reuse waste heat from industrial processes, and we could harness light from the roofs. So the first part of my project was looking at what was the type of spaces we could reuse in London, and we found that there's a lot of tunnels that are not being used. We could make them coexistent with occupied space, reuse vacant floors and rooftops, and try to see what would be the impact of this when we expand it to the city scale. So the idea is that having a rooftop greenhouse or plants within the building could impact your energy use. For example, in this office here in London, they've reused the warm air rich in CO2 from downstairs, and it goes upstairs, which is cleaned by the greenhouse and can be brought back downstairs by a fan, and that has reduced their energy use for heating by 41%. So we're combining so this is one thing we're doing. Another thing we're doing is monitoring an urban farm in London called Growing Underground, which is a World War II air raid shelter that has been transformed into a big hydroponic farm. And so what we've done is, this place wasn't designed for a farm, it was designed for sheltering people. So how can we make sure they use as little energy as possible while producing as much food? So at the moment, they're growing food in this tunnel, and they're expanding to 8 more tunnels over the coming year. And we're going to be using the data we've collected over the past 2 years and the model we've made to analyze how much energy they need to make sure they have the adequate temperatures and CO2 levels to better design the next farms. So this is the basic principles of the model we're making and how this can impact the energy use of a building, where we do some heat and mass transfers at the plants level and how much energy you need for lighting and ventilation, and how does that all transfer within the farm. The farm needs to be between 20 and 25 degrees and over 600 parts per million, which is exactly the conditions that we have in our office. So this is where our third project comes in, where we're trying to develop over every floor green walls and hydroponics along the windowsills to see how urban farming can also impact well-being, productivity, and just the CO2 levels within an office. So the aim of all these projects is to create an urban farming tool so that we could better design and integrate rooftop greenhouses and hydroponics within our designs. Thank you.